Hi everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is David. I am on a weight loss journey and I'm documenting all the highs and lows of that journey. I have lost over 75 pounds since my heaviest. I was almost 270 pounds. Right now I'm hovering at 192 pounds. And so I've made my fair share of mistakes during that time, and I wanted to just talk about those things with you today. As someone who's battled with their weight for my whole life, like I said, I've made my fair share of mistakes and want to help those of you that are kind of just starting your weight loss journey, or maybe you're starting over again, and maybe prevent you from making the same mistakes that I have. And I think you'll really be interested in number 6, actually. Before we dive in, if you could do me a huge favor and hit that like and subscribe button for me. I saw that over 95% of my viewers of my last video are not subscribed to my channel. I am going to be bringing this type of content to you for, I don't know, the foreseeable future. And so if you find this valuable, please hit that like, hit that subscribe. It'll help your boy out a lot and help me continue to make these videos for you guys. So with all that said, let us jump right in. Okay, so number 1 mistake I have made is just being so impatient. I think impatience is a mistake because this is not a short-term thing, right? We're not doing this for a month or a couple weeks or just to get in shape for the summer. At least that's not why I'm doing it. For me, this is a lifelong journey, and because I know it's lifelong, I need to extend my timeline, my time horizon, and not be so impatient. Now, the reason I say impatience is a mistake I've made is because as much as this weight loss journey is about the physical things we do, what we cook, what we put into our bodies, what workouts we do, I would say almost like 90% of it is actually mental. It's not what you do, it's how you think, it's how you feel emotionally about the process. And so if you're feeling impatient about where you are in your journey, or that you're not making progress as fast as you'd like, that's really going to wear you down, I think, over time. Because again, this is, for me and for a lot of you out there, I know this is a long-term thing. And I would say recalibrate how long you think this is actually going to take. Like, maybe an easy way to do that is double or triple the amount of time you think this will take, not just for you to lose the weight, but to keep it off, because that's really the most important part. So that's my mistake number 1, is being too impatient. Number 2 is related, and this is, and I actually did mention it, it's about having too short of a time horizon. And I think especially now, like we're in April, a lot of the TikToks I'm seeing out there are all like how to get shredded before summer. I think a lot of people think on these very short, like 3 to 6 month time horizons. But the thing is, while you can lose the weight in 3 or 6 months, I don't think that's the right way to think about your weight loss journey as a whole, right? Because what you want to do is constantly think about, how do I get better over my lifetime? And I think that's the biggest lesson I learned. And just to kind of showcase this, like, for example, I've been on a cut now for about 13 straight weeks, which is really cool. Proud of myself. But even though I've lost almost 40 pounds in this cut, it's actually just the beginning. And the reason I say that is because, my goal weight, goal body fat percentage is probably not going to hit into the 170s, maybe even 160s. That being said, we're not going to be cutting for the next 6-8 months. What we're going to do is stop the cut probably next week, move into a maintenance phase, move into even a lean bulk phase, and then go back into a cut. And so when I say time horizon, it's best to think about this over 9, 12, 18 months versus a month or 6 weeks or 3 months or something like that, right? Because it takes your body a lot of time to recoup from a cut, to get into maintenance, and then to do it all over again. So I would think more in cycles than in months even. So hopefully that helps someone out there. That was mistake number 2. Mistake number 3. Now this is a mistake I made many times, which is I would change my meal prep way too often, right? And it's understandable. You get sick of your meals, or it's like so boring to eat the same thing every day, every meal. But the thing is, I think at least for me, what I learned is that your body needs to adjust to foods, and sometimes it takes time. You might be using more salt in one meal prep versus another, and so all of these things impact our weight. And I think if you're constantly changing your meals, and at least for me when I was, that would mean I'm constantly changing the variables. I couldn't really tell, oh, I gained a few pounds here, I wonder what it is. I couldn't really pinpoint it because there were so many changing variables in the form of my meals. And so I would say, even though it's tough, even though it's boring, maybe try to stick to a set of meal plans for a month at a time, just to see how does it actually affect me over 30 days. So that's a big mistake I made, and one I'm trying not to make actively. Mistake number 4. This one is tough. This one is tough, especially if you're just starting out. But my mistake number 4 was mindlessly following other people's advices, frameworks, or even their own plans. And this is, like I said, it's tough because when you're first starting, you don't really know what to do. You kind of just need to copy other people's advice or even plans. But over time, I think what's most important is to figure out what works for you. And I think it took me, 32 years to figure out what works for me. So I'm not saying this is an instant process, but it is really important because, like I said earlier, this whole weight loss thing it's not a chapter. It's kind of like a lifetime journey, at least for me, right? And so in order to do that, I need to really know my own body. I need to know the foods that I don't get sick of, the foods I still enjoy eating, the workout regimes that work for me that are challenging and fun. But if I just, mindlessly do what someone else tells me to do, I will never really understand that about myself. And therefore, I won't really know what will work for me in the long term. And that's what's most important, is you knowing what works for you, you knowing what you enjoy, what is fun for you, helps you do this for the rest of your life versus just for a season. And so that was the mistake I made, was just constantly listening to other people, getting frustrated, and not really having an outlet for that. And so I highly suggest, obviously copy other people at the beginning, but over time, really study what works for you, what lights you up, what doesn't. Hopefully that helps. Mistake number 5. This one's tough, y'all. This one is tough, and that is being lax on the weekends on both training and nutrition. And I get it. It's so easy. Like, we all live busy lives, busy work weeks, and when Friday night hits, you kind of just want to let loose a little bit. I found that I could derail an entire 5 days worth of progress from just one day of being lax on the weekend. Like, for example, I'll put it really concretely. I was really doing well for 5 days and, eating to my meal plans, training every day, resting up. And then Saturday comes. I have one big meal that I didn't have before. I didn't train. Maybe I drank some and I felt sluggish, so I didn't rest well. And all of these things kind of voided out the work I did during the week. And if you do that over a month or 2 months or 3 months, you're going to constantly feel like you're stuck in this cycle that never ends. I'm not saying don't ever have fun. I'm not saying don't have a cheat meal. And I'm not saying enjoy your weekends. What I am saying, though, is if you are noticing this pattern about yourself where, you work really hard for 5 days and then Saturday, Sunday comes and you kind of have to start over, I would say maybe give yourself a hard reset. Like, for 2 weeks, for 2 weekends straight, do not come off plan. And then see what happens. I mean, what happens when you do come off plan for a weekend. So try the opposite and see what happens. And that was a big mistake I made, is just being lax on the weekends. And now for me, even on the weekends, I'm not that lax. Actually, nothing really changes. And so that's been a big help for me. Okay, number 6. This is the one I said earlier that was kind of surprising. And I was actually watching this other video that talked about how much the scale and the numbers on the scale impact people during weight loss journeys, and even like people like bodybuilders, where you could feel good, you could feel strong, you could feel lean, but the number on the scale doesn't represent it. And so, like everything else, I think for me, what I try to do is make sure that I can understand the variables so that I can understand my results or lack thereof, right? And so one of the things my coach told me to do early on is make sure to weigh yourself every day at the same time. The mistake I did was weighing myself differently at different times of the day during the week. And, it was surprising to me because, but it makes a lot of sense, right? What was surprising is later in the day I weigh myself before a meal and before working out, the more I would see the scale go down versus earlier. So just to be, really clear, I normally wake up, at least these days, around 5:30 a.m. to go to the gym. When I weigh in at about 6 a.m., it's actually a little bit heavier than if I were to weigh in at like 8:30 or 9 a.m., right? Just because I think the body's had more time to digest, maybe I had a bowel movement or whatever. That timing, even if it's just like a couple of hours actually makes for me a big difference on the number and the scale. So what's my practical advice here? I would say, one, obviously pick a time that you can weigh yourself every day before you work out and before you eat. But also maybe try to pick a time earlier in the morning, but not super early. I would target like 9 or 10 a.m. if it's possible. So that's a big mistake I made. And it's a mistake because it just made me feel so confused. Like, oh my gosh, yesterday I was at 191. Today I'm at 195. What's the issue here? I didn't do anything wrong. And it could be I just weighed myself a couple hours earlier. So that was mistake number 6. That was really surprising to me. And yeah, hopefully gives you some peace of mind if you're struggling with that. Number 7. Now this is all about fitness. Is the mistake I made was not doing zone 2 cardio. And I know there's been a lot of debate about zone 2 cardio, but at the end of the day, science says it's the most fat burning type of cardio if you're in zone 2, which I basically found some advice that if you take 180 and subtract your age, that should be kind of where your heart rate is during cardio to be in zone 2. For me, that's basically around 138 beats per minute to 148 beats per minute. And so I try to stay in that zone during cardio. Before, I wasn't doing that. And actually, this is kind of a recent development. Just over the last 2 weeks have I focused in on zone 2 cardio. And I think it's starting to make a big difference, right? And before, I was doing just very intense cardio because I wanted to get it over with, if I'm being really honest. I was so sick and tired of being on the treadmill for 30 minutes or whatever. And so I would just push myself as hard as I can, hit that elevation higher, hit that speed higher. Sometimes I do jump rope, hit that jump rope, go as fast as I can. And while that does get the quote cardio quote out of the way, I don't think it's really helping in terms of fat loss or even heart health. So for me, that's just something I've incorporated that I made a mistake about before. And then lastly, and this is true especially if you're just starting because it's tough, but the last mistake I made was not pushing myself till failure while weightlifting. And what does that mean? That means that the last couple of reps, you actually feel like you can't do it, or you literally physically cannot push the weight up. And this is important because the most meaningful amount of muscle tearing and therefore muscle creation happens in these last few reps of every set. I actually heard a coach say that if you're doing a set of 10 reps, the first 7 don't matter if you don't finish out the last 3, especially up until failure. In practice, for me, what this looks like is physically cannot lift the weight one more time. Like if I'm doing a seated shoulder press, it means that, my arm is shaking and I can't, and I'm stuck and I just have to let the weight go. It's to that point. Why I said it's tough, especially if you're just starting, is because, you already feel weak, when you're first starting. And so to do this type of intensity might be kind of hard, but it's something I wish I had done before, and a mistake I made, like basically just being lazy while training is another way to put it. And so even though it hurts, even though it's painful, we kind of have to push through that and hit our limits in order to see the progress we want. Yeah, those are the 8 mistakes I've made over my weight loss journey. I'm sure I'll make plenty more. Maybe I'll even look back on this video one day and be like, what I said, that was a mistake. So I don't know, we're all learning, all growing together. Please let me know what you're struggling with down in the comments, mistakes you've made, so that our community can grow and help each other. So thank you guys so much for watching and your support. I will check back in with you next week. Peace.